So I just went over more of Walt Whitman, Song of Myself, with the cough of myself right now. Anyways, um, so yeah, I talked about his influence on his writing and on modern American poetry, and also he had a strong, passionate, almost mystical belief in the United States. On a controversial level, which I think you may be reading in Howard Zinn's book, he had some very negative view about Mexicans. And, you know, again, we find that all these characters are, flawed in many different ways. On the other side of his kind of really zealous patriotism, he was known, but not thoroughly known, to have to be a homosexual, to be gay, and that has been downplayed often in American history. Some have kind of maybe overemphasized it. It appears that it's not thoroughly documented, but it appears he definitely was attracted to men. And I thought I would just throw this and show this kind of bizarre is not the right word. Well, there's this clip. I'm going to play 10 minutes in of Allen Ginsberg's thought on this. And Allen Ginsberg, he died several years ago. He was a major influential poet in America himself. He was a part of the Beat movement, or Beatniks, friend and contemporary of Jack Kerouac, if you guys know literature. And in his older age here, he kind of looked almost rabbinic, but in his earlier years, he was a really wild hippie into drugs, and celebrated openly his interest in gay eroticism, which got him and his publishers in trouble with the law at times. But there was a discussion about Walt Whitman in this, which is why I wanted to just show you this. So here, I'll put this on.
Allen Ginsberg, you are America's best-known poet.
Who slept with the hysterical naked. I did revise it that much to get some sense of distance and irony from it.
You speak of the need for candor in writing and making the private world public. That's what the poet does. Is that right? Is that what you do?
Yes, very consciously following the direction of my ultimate American mentor, Walt Whitman, who in 1855, early edition of Leaves of Grass, said that he hoped that American poets would develop in the direction of candor. Kind of an inadvertent, manipulative frankness, like spontaneous frankness.
To what degree was Whitman able, as you were, to be candid about his homosexuality?
Well, it's amazing if you read the Calamus sections of Leaves of Grass, or even his Old Age Echoes, where he has to talk about his constipation. He was quite candid about his emotions. He wasn't candid about his physical loves, if he had any. Although I slept with Neil Cassidy, who slept with the Gavin Arthur, the grandson of President Chester Arthur, who had slept with Edward Carpenter, who said that Edward Carpenter told him he had slept with Walt Whitman. So there's some kind of lineage of gossip there. But I don't think Whitman was able to proclaim the physical love in his poems, but he certainly proclaimed the emotional attachment in the Calamus sections.
In Kaddish, you mourn for your mother.
Yeah.
Tell me about her.
Okay. Well, that was Allen Ginsberg's interesting take on his connection to Walt Whitman. Don't know if I'd ever heard of anybody linking themselves quite like that in a tradition, but that was the way of Allen Ginsberg. The main reason why I wanted to just show you this, though, is that to talk about that influence that Walt Whitman has had, at least on the imagination, at the very least, of some contemporary writers, and kind of also showing how he links up with a kind of conservative tradition of, of celebrating the United States, kind of like really original nationalism, to perhaps being linked to the more alternative lifestyle approach to American life that has never been acceptable in the mainstream, and maybe more so now, but even now still controversial nonetheless. So that's all I want to say about that for now. So we also had other writers such as Herman Melville, who wrote Moby Dick, and Edgar Allan Poe. These are great American writers. Edgar Allan Poe is a Southerner. So by the way, next time you hear, The Raven or any of his other works, read it with a Southern drawl. It might throw you off a little bit because maybe a lot of you don't know that. But these were great writers that are still very influential in the world literature. Edgar Allan Poe, I always enjoyed him for his poetry more than his short stories. But he is more known, I think, for his literature, which people claim is essentially that you get to Stephen King now through going back to Edgar Allan Poe. He's kind of like how Walt Whitman is to poetry, what to the kind of horror novels. Edgar Allan Poe is the originator in American literature, and you have Melville, who also had these kind of profound ideas, such as the man versus nature and Moby Dick, and many people write on that. So I just kind of want to bring up these characters again in this legacy of an American writers. I'm going to switch gears to a kind of a unique form of American romanticism, and actually I should clarify when I talk about romanticism. In Europe, remember I talked about how Thomas Jefferson was a man of the Enlightenment. Enlightenment period really believed in the power of the intellect. Okay, and deists believed in God, but God was, this powerful entity that made the universe and the earth and then kind of walked away. Not so much a personal God. And in a sense, many people started to feel that there was something impersonal, or, about this Enlightenment trend to all of a sudden try to break things down into some sort of like to a cog in a wheel. And there was, like all things that go into one extreme, there's a reaction in the other extreme. And so the Romantic period in the 19th century throughout Europe, which affected the United States, was to celebrate emotion and art and impulse, nature, as opposed to you could say human-made things. I mean, I'm kind of oversimplifying, but that's just kind of idea. So Romanticism is a type of ideological trend happening in the 19th century. And now in common usage, when we say romantic, we're talking about somebody who's, not just going to have sex with somebody or talk with them as a friend, but you have a kind of intimate, like, love situation that is, romantic. We know what we mean when we say that, right? For the most part. Okay? A dinner, holding hands and soft glances at your lover is romantic, right? But just don't get committed to that definition or idea when I'm talking about that word right now. Okay? So, the Romantics in this period are mainly from New England, influenced by German philosophers such as Kant, Hegel, Schelling. They're not easy to read. By the way, Karl Marx was heavily influenced by Hegel. Just pick up Hegel and Kant and Schelling and try to take a quick read. Tell me how easy it is to figure out what the hell they're talking about. It's not happening. Not easy. Very mystical-ish, even though it's in the tradition of secular philosophy. And then you had English writers are also influenced by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, which is a very interesting writer. And then William Wordsworth, a poet himself And Wordsworth and Coleridge using more of that poetic tradition of rhyme scheme and rhythm and music in a way different than what we saw with Walt Whitman. Okay, so we had reason versus understanding. Reason was the highest human faculty, innate capacity to grasp beauty and truth through instincts and emotion. Understanding would be the use of intellect in the narrow sense, artificial ways imposed by society and repression of instinct. And so what was the goal? Liberation from the confines of understanding and the cultivation of reason, to strive to, quote unquote, transcend the limits of the intellect and allow the emotions of the soul. Okay, so this is a kind of philosophical, mystical system. I'll end here and then we'll continue on in the next lecture.